What up, everybody? With the long delay between Force Season 2 and Season 3, one storyline that a lot of people might have forgotten about is the return of an OG power character in Force Season 3, teased by Force showrunner Gary Lennon in an interview with TheMessenger.com at the conclusion of Season 2 back in 2023. And in this interview, Lennon said, "A couple times throughout the season, it was brought to me, do you want so and so to come back? Do you want so and so to be in this?" And Lennon said, and I was like, no. I think one of the weaknesses of the first season was that there were too many stories to follow, too many characters, and I wanted to focus on the characters that we had. And one of my dilemmas as a storyteller taking over season 2 was that I needed to constrict and contract the stories at the same time. Then Lennon went on to say, if given a season 3, I do have a story in mind where I'll bring back a character from our Power OG world to intersect with Tommy Egan. He said, I think it'd be a really cool, interesting reveal. I think that character intersecting in our world would make absolute sense and would dirty things up in a really good way that would excite me to write. This is what Gary Lennon said at the end of Season 2 in regards to a mystery character returning to the Power Universe in Season 3 of Power Book Force. And just from those few sentences, there's a couple clues about who this mystery character could be. First off, from him asking if he wants so-and-so to come back, if he wants so-and-so to be in this. The fact that they're asking him if he wants this specific character to come back indicates that it's someone we haven't seen in the Power Universe recently, like in Book 2. He did also confirm it was a character from Power OG and not Power Book 2. So this cuts it down to characters who are introduced in OG Power, and that likely hadn't been seen in Power Book 2. He said bringing this OG Power character to Force to intersect with Tommy would be a very interesting reveal. And this is a big clue right there, using the word reveal. Why would this character appearing in Force be a big reveal? Then he said this character in our world, talking about the Book 4 Force world, would dirty things up in a really good way that would excite me to write. So it also sounds like this is a character who would be someone who moves the needle, and also someone whose storyline Lennon is excited to write. So when we break it down and take our time dissecting what Lennon said in this interview, to me it only sounds like it could be one character who's returning, and that character would be none other than Ghost. Because yeah, there is a few other characters from OG Power who could potentially be brought back in Force that could dirty things up, and even be an exciting character for Lennon to write about, and I'll get to them in a minute. But what character returning from OG Power would actually be a reveal? The reveal would be Ghost returning and it being revealed that he's been alive this entire time. I know a lot of people were disappointed that Ghost didn't return at the conclusion of Power Book 2 Ghost. But keep in mind, this interview came out months before Season 4 Power Book 2 aired. So since he was saying this in an interview at the back end of 2023, that likely means they had been asking him about this character returning likely since before Season 2 was actually even filmed. Meaning the return of this OG character had been set in motion to return in Power Book 4 for Season 3 ever since the writing and filming process for Season 2 of Force. So that could potentially also explain a lot of things, like the real reason why both Power Book 2 and Force were both cancelled, and why Force Season 3 will be the last season that we see before the next spin-off, Power Legacy. Then there's also the exclusive images from Season 3 that show somebody sitting in Tommy's loft with Tommy looking at this person like he saw a ghost. Tommy also has gloves on, all black, and a gun in his hand like he's been putting in work, but doesn't have his gun drawn at this person like they're a threat. Like I said in a video I made a couple weeks ago, this has to be either Ghost or Tariq. But given everything Gary Lennon said in that interview about bringing back an OG Power character, and the fact that it would be a big reveal makes me think this is Tommy finding out that Ghost is still alive. And that's also something that's debatable amongst Power fans, just like whether Ghost is dead or alive. Within the debates of people who think Ghost is alive, there's the debate if Tommy has known that Ghost has been alive this entire time or not. Keep it in mind that it still hasn't been revealed what was in the manila envelope that Kate gave Tommy from Ghost at the end of OG Power. But personally, I think it's most likely that Tommy doesn't know that Ghost is alive based upon the fact that Tommy was holding Ghost back at that point in time, and neither were they on the best terms. Getting me to the other characters besides Ghost who Gary Lennon could have potentially been talking about in this interview. And when I get into the other characters, based upon the details and what Gary Lennon said, it makes it seem just that much more likely that he was indeed talking about the return of none other than James St. Patrick, aka Ghost. Other than Ghost, the character or characters that Lennon was most likely talking about returning in Power Book 4 Force would be Lisa Marie Proctor, her Aunt Dolores, and the Italian Mafia. Because everybody's been anticipating that this storyline would come back into play eventually because of the final scene with Tommy and Lisa Marie together when she mentions that she knows Tommy killed her dad. And Tommy ultimately replies, if she wants to come see him about it one day, then he'd understand. And not only did Tommy kill Joe, he also killed his cousin Benny, a capo in the Italian Mafia, and the real reason Tommy left New York in the first place. But with that said, when talking about OG Power characters returning to Force, we also have to keep in mind that Tommy is dead in New York also after faking his death at the end of Season 1 of Power Book 2. So in reality, ain't nobody in New York even thinking about Tommy Egan right now, unless they were to find out that he's still alive. But with that said, keep in mind that Miguel and the Insane Prince gang were doing recon work on Tommy back in New York, and Nasi at one point told Tommy that Julio's boy Chico in New York said what's up. So with that said, rumors could begin to spread in New York that Tommy Egan's still alive and living in Chicago. And this could be why the Savello mob is in Chicago, possibly hooking up with their connections there to find out if Tommy Egan is actually alive and living in Chicago or not. Other than Ghost or the Italian mob, another character that makes a lot of sense is Cash Grant, Keisha's son. Cash returning could definitely dirty things up trying to figure out who killed his mom. But again, I asked what the reveal would be concerning Cash's return. The next most likely character, if he wasn't talking about Ghost, Cash, or the Savello mob, would be 2-Bit. But again, like the Savello mob, the only reveal concerning him returning on Force would be finding out that Tommy is still alive. And those aren't really reveals because us as the audience already know that Tommy's alive. But concerning 2-Bit, his character showing up in Chicago is very unlikely unless it's at the very end of Force, and at that point, I think it's either going to be Ghost or Tariq returning, because the timeline doesn't really add up. Keeping in mind that Force is already behind Book 2's timeline, that's why we definitely won't see Tariq in Force unless it's at the very end. And with that said, 2-Bit was seen briefly still living in New York in Season 4 Power Book 2 Ghost. And because 2-Bit's been seen a few times in Book 2 and as recently as Season 4, him showing up in Force wouldn't actually be considered a comeback for his character, in my opinion. And with that said, the same goes for the following characters, who I give a very small chance of it being who Lennon was talking about, but not saying that these characters won't also be in Season 3 of Force. And that's Tasha St. Patrick, Blanca Rodriguez, and Rashad Tate. But like 2-Bit, all of them have been in Book 2, so they wouldn't really be making a comeback as a character. But those are really the only OG characters left who he could possibly even be talking about. There's also Drago the Serb, who was under Jason Mitchell, but even if he does return, I definitely don't think that's who they were asking Lennon about bringing back. And there you have it. Let me know who you think the mystery character that will be returning in Force Season 3 is in the comments, as well as your thoughts, theories, and predictions.